Welcome, this is Mr. Bowlby. We are in CKLA Domain 1 for 3rd grade, The Wind and the Willows. This is Lesson 2, The Riverbank, Part 2. Here again is our Willows countryside where all of our characters in our story are located, and we'll be talking about them and the places they live. What do we call the part of the story where the characters speak to one another? Dialogue. How do we know we're reading dialogue? Because dialogue has quotation marks. And as you see, I put the sentence dialogue has quotation marks in quotation marks to help remember. Dialogue is one way an author can describe a person, place, or thing, or give the reader information in a story. Narration and dialogue are two literary tools, or two ways the author tells a story. What we call the part of the story that tells what is happening and does not have quotation marks around it is narration. Anything that does not have quotes in it is read by the narrator, and that is called narration. So what part is dialogue and what part is narration? You look at the following text here. You see the rat said nothing but stooped, unfastened a rope and hauled on it, then lightly stepped into the little boat, which Maul had not observed. That is all narration. Further down, you see rat sculled across, then he held up his forepaw at Maul, as the mole stepped gingerly down. Lean on that. See, the phrase lean on that is in quotations. That tells us the rat is saying that statement. So anything in quotes is dialogue. Anything in there in between is narration. Perspective is important in a story. What is perspective? Perspective is how someone sees or experiences something. It lets the reader know from whose experience the scene of the story is mainly being described. Perspective can shift from one character to another as a way of telling more about the story. Here are some real-life photos of animals that are referred to in our story, The Wind and the Willows, with a badger, water rat, mole, and toad. None of which I think I would want to see in my yard. Possibly the toad. That's about it. And of course we have Otter. Gotta love the otters. Let's make some predictions about the read aloud. The Riverbank Part 2. After the last read aloud, Rat and Mole, mixing up my words, Rat and Mole were getting ready to picnic on the backwater. Predict what kind of adventures Mole and Rat might have on the backwater. Listen carefully to see if your predictions are correct. The stories in this domain are considered fantasies. That means the stories have parts that could not happen in real life. The Domain 1 listening journal on page 2 is where you will write down 5 examples from the read aloud that could not happen. So you'll be listening for those 5 examples as we read. Several words for you to pause and review. They'll be found in the text in the story. Arranged, dejected, escorted, seized, and stability. Sometimes it's good to have the vocabulary up front from words that might be new or challenging, especially for us to make sure we know what the definitions are as we go into reading. Always read with the dictionary. All right, story. Leaving the main stream, they now passed into what seemed like a little landlocked lake. Green grass sloped down to either edge. Brown, snaky tree roots gleamed below the surface of the quiet water. Ahead of them could be heard the foamy tumble of the weir, with a restless dripping wheel attached to the mill house. The scene was so beautiful that Mole could only hold up his forepaws and gasp, "Oh my!" The rat brought the boat alongside the bank and tied it up. Then he helped the still, awkward Mole safely ashore, swung out the luncheon basket. The Mole asked to be allowed to unpack it all by himself. The rat was very pleased to indulge him. Mole excitedly shook out the tablecloth and spread it. Then one by one, he took out the mysterious packets and carefully arranged them. Still gasping, "Oh my, oh my." When all was ready, the rat said, "Eat up, old fellow." And the Mole, who had started his spring cleaning at a very early hour, had not yet eaten since then, eagerly set to work. Here's a picture of a weir and a watermill. Watermills are used to grind up flour, to grind up wheat in order to make flour and make bread. "What are you looking at?" said the rat presently, when the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander off the tablecloth. "I am looking," said the mole, "at a streak of bubbles that I see traveling along the surface of the water." "Bubbles? Oh," said the rat cheerily. A broad, glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank, and the otter hauled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy beggars," he observed. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?" "Well, this was a spontaneous affair," explained the rat. "By the way, meet my friend Mr. Mole." "Proud, I'm sure," said the otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "The entire world seems to be out on the river today. I came up this backwater to try to get a moment's peace and then stumbled upon you fellows." At that moment, there was a rustling sound behind them. It seemed to come from the hedge wherein last year's leaves still clung. Seconds later, a stripy head with high shoulders peered out from within. "Come on, old badger," shouted the rat. The badger trotted forward, then grunted, "Company," then turned his back and disappeared from view. "That's just the sort of fellow he is," observed the disappointed rat. "Simply hates society. Now we shouldn't see any more of him today. Well, tell us, who's out on the river?" "Toad's out, for one," replied the otter, "in his brand new wagger boat. New togs, new everything." The two animals looked at each other and laughed. "Once again, it was nothing but sailing," said the rat. "Then he tired of that and took to punting. Nothing would please him but to punt all day. Last year it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in his houseboat and pretend we liked it. It's all the same, whatever he takes up. He gets tired of it and starts on something fresh." "Such a good fellow, too," remarked the otter reflectively, "but no stability, especially in a boat." From where they sat, they could get a glimpse of the main stream across the island that separated them. And just then a wagger boat flashed into view. The rower was a short, stout figure who was splashing badly and rolling a good deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him. However, Toad, for it was he, shook his head and concentrated on the task at hand. "He'll be out of the boat in a minute if he rolls like that," said Rat. "Of course he will," chuckled the otter. "Did I ever tell you that good story about Toad and the Lockkeeper?" Which, by the way, this is a picture of a Lockkeeper. It is usually found along a canal or river that goes up and down over hills, and so the boats that are traveling, the Lockkeeper will raise or lower the water to make it easier for the boats to travel. "The story happened this way," Otter continued. "Toad..." At that moment, a mayfly swerved unsteadily on the gentle spring breeze toward Otter. There was a swirl of water and a clump. Mayfly was visible no more. Neither was the otter. The mole looked down. The voice was still in his ears, but the grass whereon he had sprawled was clearly vacant. Not an otter to be seen. But again, there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the water. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole remembered that it was considered rude to make any sort of comment about the sudden disappearance of one's friends. "Well, well," said the rat, "I suppose we ought to be moving. I wonder which one of us should pack the luncheon basket." He did not sound overly eager to do it himself. "Oh, please, let me," said the mole. So, of course, the rat let him. The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards. The mole was very full of lunch and self-satisfaction, and already quite at home in a boat, or so he thought. He was, however, getting a bit restless, and presently he said, "Ratty, please, I want to row now." The rat shook his head with a smile. "Not yet, my young friend," he said. "Wait till you've had a few lessons." The mole was quiet for a minute or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of Rat. Suddenly, he jumped up and seized the sculls from him. Rat, who had been gazing out over the water, was taken by surprise. He fell backwards off his seat. The triumphant mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with much more confidence. "Stop it, you silly!" cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. "You'll have us over!" The mole flung his skulls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether. His legs flew up above his head and he found himself laying on the top of Rat. Greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, swoosh! Over went the boat, and Mole found himself struggling in the river. Oh my! How cold the water was, and oh, how very wet it felt. How it sang in his ears as he went down, down, down. How bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering. How black was his despair when he felt himself sinking again. Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of his neck. It was the rat, and he was laughing. All right, here's a word for us to look at: automatopoeia. Automatopoeia is when a word is used to imitate sound. For example, splosh or plop. The rat got hold of the skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and swimming behind propelled the helpless animal to shore. When the rat had rubbed him down and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, "Now then, old fellow, trot up and down till you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket." So the dismal mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted about till he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged into the water again. He recovered the boat, fetched his floating property, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket. When all was ready to begin again, the mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat, and as they set off, he said in a low voice, "Ratty, my generous friend, I'm very sorry indeed for my foolish behavior. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. I have been a fool. Will you ever forgive me?" "That's all right, bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it. And look here, I really think you better come and stop with me for a little time. My home is very plain and rough, but I'm sure I can make you comfortable. I'll teach you to row and to swim." The mole was so touched by his kindness that he had to brush a tear away. But the rat kindly looked in another direction. Before long, the mole's spirit again. When they got home, the rat made a bright fire in the parlor. He planted the mole in the armchair and in front of it. He fetched down a dressing gown and slippers for him, and told him river stories till supper time. Supper was the most cheerful meal. Shortly afterward, a sleepy mole had to be escorted upstairs by his host to the best bedroom. There he laid his head on the pillow in great peace and contentment. This was just the beginning of their friendship and the time together on the river. So, were your predictions correct about what kind of adventures these animals might have on the riverbank? Obviously, you can share some examples from the read aloud that could not have happened. Those are the things that you would list. 5 things at least that could not happen in real life. Most likely be considered like mole being rescued by rat, among one or the other. Animals talking to each other, for that matter. All right, what is perspective again? Perspective is the experience and the eyes, through the eyes of the character which the story is being told. So it's the experience of the character, what he's going through. Now, today's perspective was told through Maul. Now, there are some new characters we met today. Otter, Toad, and Badger, although Toad didn't really have any lines. Well, we saw him, but that's about it. Otter and Badger, though, we did have a couple lines from. Now, are Otter, Toad, and Badger the main characters of the story so far? Or are the Water Rat and the Mole still the main characters? Water Rat and Mole are still the main characters. Mole learns about Toad through dialogue between Rat and Otter. What words can you use to describe Toad, based on just what we know so far about him from the others? We haven't gotten to observe him very much yet. He is easily bored. I mean, he went from one thing to another pretty quickly, and that's how he's going to be throughout the story. He's a good fellow with no stability, according to our characters. Why does Mole suddenly jump up and seize the sculls or oars? Moment of absolute excitement. Well, He was jealous and prideful for a moment and wanted to show Rat that he could row just as well. What do we call the part of the story that is not dialogue? Remember, if it's being read by the narrator, it's called narration. Obviously, the quotations and the dialogue are read by the narrator too, but if it's not in quotations, it's narration. What happens after Maul seizes the oars? The boat goes over. The boat flips over and they end up in the water. Maul can't swim and Rat has to help him to safety. Is Rat angry with the dejected Maul? How do you know? Nope, he's not. In fact, he's laughing. He's laughing and helps Maul to safety. He speaks cheerily to Maul after the incident. Rat arranges for Maul to come to his house and escorts Maul to his best bedroom and basically provides a great deal of hospitality. Hospitality is another one of those themes throughout the story of Wind in the Willows. Hospitality, along with friendship and loyalty and a whole bunch of other good ones. Now here's a question that we will ask in class to discuss with a partner, and then we will share out different answers. How does Rat demonstrate friendship? Does Maul demonstrate friendship? Why or why not? So you can pause for a moment and think about that. Here is a list of several options that you could have said that produce the theme friendship throughout the story so far. Rat takes Maul on a boat ride in the picnic. He introduces Maul to his friends. He does not get angry when Maul overturns the boat. He invites Maul to his home. Maul is a nice companion for the day. He packs up his picnic basket. He does grab the oars from Rat, which might be something a friend shouldn't be doing, but Rat does forgive Maul immediately afterward and invites him to stay. So that's pretty good. It's pretty awesome. All right. The word of this lesson that we want to point out is dejected. In today's read aloud, you heard, when all was ready to begin, again, the Mole, limp and dejected, took his seat in the stern of the boat. When someone says dejected, she or he is feeling sad or depressed. Like Kylie felt dejected when he wasn't, I guess it's Kyle felt dejected when he wasn't chosen for the job opening. Good. Have you ever felt dejected? How did you feel dejected? So you can go ahead and answer that question using the sentence, or using the word dejected in a full sentence. Good. And here's a phrase that we learned today. Let bygones be bygones. That is in the story. And it means what? What do you think it means? What words do you hear in the word bygones? A bygone is something that has already happened. It's gone by. Bye-bye. Explain that the meaning of this... Wait, that's me. The meaning of this proverb is that one should forget about past events that may have caused bad feelings. So who in today's read aloud let bygones be bygones? Rat. And how does Rat's actions express this saying? Instead of saying, don't think any more of it, Rat could have said, let bygones be bygones. Rat is no longer thinking of trouble Maul caused. He prefers to focus on the friendship and forgive Maul. So listen for times where this phrase is appropriate as you listen to the story. Try to find other opportunities to use this in the classroom. So again, let bygones be bygones means don't think any more of it. Changing perspective. Retell a section of the story from Otter's perspective. Imagine that the otter swimming along the riverbank, they were looking at the otter's perspective, and as he's swimming along the riverbank, he sees Mole and Rat. So think about retelling the section of the story from Otter's perspective, if the scene begins with him and stays with him instead of the mole. So it would begin by him seeing the two on the riverbank and then ending with him eating the mayfly and jumping into the water. So he's leaving them and going into the water. Includes settings and characters within the events. You might also draw a picture and write some sentences telling the story about that perspective. So this is, again, an extension option to do during the lesson or at home as additional homework. Okay? And this is a listening journal where you would write down the 5 things in the read aloud that could not happen in real life. All right. that is the end of this lesson. That is lesson 2 of Wind in the Willows, domain 1. Have a good day. See you in the next lesson.